Wondering what that was. That sound I could hear. Back to the old Pokemon. So mostly the same team. Realised I've gone the wrong way. But no, it should be, hopefully, getting towards the end. And also I have found maybe a quick tutorial to turn the microphone upside down and flip it around, and hope it works. Fortunately, grinding in this game has absolutely no appeal because the melding attributes of the XP system. So, if you have catch up, it doesn't matter. There are other Pokemon. Places like this. Found out by accident. I think I did have a quick try at going through here, but wasn't too happy with it. Not happy whatsoever. Most of what I found in here was Pokemon I didn't like seeing. Like that. There was one that I was going to replace into my party, but then I kind of forgot and lost interest. But let's go into my bag quickly. Samurott, unfortunately your time has come. I need you to actually, you know, be able to ride the waves. But apparently even a dog can as well. Actually, you know what? I'm curious here. Who's have I got? Yeah, we'll forget Bite finally. I can always get it back. Taking the logical doggy paddle to the extreme. Let's see what's in the water. If it's not a crab. Oh, it's one of these. Very low level one of those too. Oops. I will just catch it, not kill it. And what's in the rare swarm? It is the blue one, at an even lower level. Well, never mind. Did not expect you to be on water, like at all. Let me test my skills. Let me punch you in the face. Is that also possible? Also slightly annoyed, but then it's ace trainers. Should not be surprised that they have like 20 different fucking Pokemon types. Crocodile. It's actually your time to shine. Goodbye. Things are as fast as fuck, boy. Ah, the most subtle hinting in the universe. Oh, one of you. There's the Anteater. Get down! Oops, didn't mean to drop a rock on your head and kill you. Oopsie daisy. Oh, here they come. Here comes the annoying ones. Is this? Oh, I see why. Just looked up above, being dense at this point. Yep, here we go. Bunch of the same Pokemon that thinks you'll get out of this cave unmolested. Really? Really? Reserve Strike, I think you still got a move I can use. You still have Flame Charge. Well, let's pick the dumb idiot up. Added by so many revives. You never know when you might need them. This game just showers you with money. So I wonder you have like a case entirely full of just general stuff. You'll get one attack in. Only one. Sweet, more candy. But you can't ride a bicycle on top of your mount. Another multiple. I guess item that I saw earlier? No, just random trap. Okay, damn it. I would like to catch one of these, please, Gerda. Don't be such a dip. I want you to hurt it, not kill it. Oh well, whatever. Oh yay. Bird. I didn't do anything yet, you stupid bird. Get off. Sorry, Victory Road prerequisite, 1 hit. No, it's in your contract, you signed it. Oh god. No, I think I've developed a steaming hatred for anything that looks like a ace trainer. Yeah, actually this time I'll let you go. Punch in the face. Nothing has died yet. Stop trying to power it on. Ah, Scoliopeed. I've already been asked if I'm going to do the post content. I'm going to say that no is very high up on that agenda. Dwayne, man. Let's heal up those that got hurt. It's so easy to get poisoned and hurt in this generation. It's unbelievably quick and competent, which should be scary. Durant is like a... It's like a bug steel type. It's kind of frustrating. Don't really have much of a counter for it yet. Let's drag you across. That means I can actually get behind there. Oh shit, this is not the Pokemon we'll be having out right now. Oh, how did you survive? I also have Dog. Dog is back up. Keep more, let's... Actually, you know what, no, let's use Surf. This is a fire ground type, maybe? And I am burning. when Slash used to be a guaranteed critical hit. I've completely forgotten what this Pokemon is. Oh, that's a problem. I think there's most of my revives already. Just trying to get through here. I don't know why Prismatic doesn't do post-game shit. This is exactly why. He wants to be done. He wants to be finished with the game, and yet he still has one in which he still hasn't done post-game stuff. Shortcut to the first floor. And now I've got myself stuck. No, I haven't got myself stuck. Just realised I'm not quite there. Oh, piss off. Freaking ants. This is how you get repels. It's because you get ants. Like, they're not worth fighting. That's the main problem. I'm gonna go check the other room. Here's another thing that's not worth fighting. Is it a Heatmor? It is. Excellent. Now, can I actually catch this damn thing? It's going to be a dick. How are you escaping on literally the first... Not even before it allows the first shake. It is an Ultra Ball, dipshit. It should catch you. Oh, it's just fire. Nah. I mean, I was going to come up with something creatively witty, just to call him a prick. There's only like one Pokemon here I haven't caught. That's, Mienfoo. Because the first one I saw, I accidentally punched to death. bigger trousers. Hello, Tor. Enjoy your luck. Conkeldurr. That's good, as friend. Although, as I have learned, this one is trade only. Hope you enjoyed 20XX, Toya. It's one of my fun games, one of my favourite games. Let's have Striker up front. It might be easier to run away from things that way. We are Dr. Logan. Oh dear. No! The striker was hurled into the air. There's air? I have no idea what this is. Oh, it's the male version. Well, it's time to ram into it. Excellent. Didn't mean to talk to you again. Let's go back round. Okay. No, I'm just looking over there, into that background. Figure out how to get there. This problem, you should never show me things. I will immediately begin formulating a plan. 135 speed. This is just the electrode of this game. Zebra whose speed knows no limits. Eventually it'll be able to clear the savannah and keep going until it drowns in the water. Excuse me, I'm going faster. Please ignore me. So even though you can only get one of these monkeys, you still fight a lot of them. Yeah, of course. Samurott still has the lucky egg. Yeah, that was worth coming back for. See, the zebra knows how to leave. In style. Baby vultures. Did I literally get an encounter? Yes, I did. An encounter right on the edge. I wonder if ants like the smell of deodorant. I'm sure I can put some on, just for them. Yeah, that looks like what I'm seeing. Ah, there's a Mindfu. We can paralyze it. I have a feeling I'm going to kill it if I use any more attacks. Excellent. That might be useful as a replacement for Girder, considering I can't evolve it any further. And it's going to have sturdy. know what, let's catch one of you just so I can get myself an Emolga if I so wish. If I even remember where that trade is. Ah, a return investment. I think I'm all done with finding Pokemon in here, so let's where's the big one? There it is, there's my 35 cans. Actually, no, I've got enough cans to do it. Let's drop myself down in a way that makes sense. It did not. I don't think. Oh, it did. Hello, Meowdola. I found you some calcium. She finished breakfast. Holy hell. I've already had dinner. Meow has had fun. Yeah, gotta take you to the Moo Moo Farms. The Miltank Farms, where everything happens. I think that's the fire type. I am correct. It's immediately going for something incredibly risky. I rarely see... I think the first time I saw Belly Drum, it never really got used. I did see it in Generation... I did see it in Generation 3 get used by Hariyama's a lot. But that's a long time ago. Let's see if I can make it flinch. No, we're just going backwards and forwards here.
Mankind discovers pets.
Oh, very funny, Bob.
It's like 100 people looking in my pants. Phrases that you wouldn't say on stream for 200, please. Is this the slide down for the other item I saw? Yes, it is. This is like one of the best but also strangest nights for me. Oh, Gigalith. Oh, hello. It's Gollum. Mostly because it's a night when no one's in the staff house. But I don't get it that often. Like I've almost got... Ooh, earthquake. I've almost got all my hours for the rest of the year. You know, flash cannon, excuse me. And they're okay, but I can't really stream with them. I think I've got an... I think after... Is it after today? I don't remember. Yeah, so next week is another 6-day week. And 2 of them are tied to... and 2 of them are tied to breakfast shifts, which are 12 hours, because they have staff all away. There are literally like 3 staff available most of the week, and I am one of them. Hello, Mish Mishty Mish. How are you doing? Hope you are feeling less sleepy, but much better. Is everyone coming to watch Pokemon tonight? Still sick. Everyone just coming to watch me play Pokemon? Got food on the way. Good. Eating is good. But I do have small crumb of comfort, but it depends if I can make it work or not. Shit, that was too far away. Damn it. Because I have been informed that a place of work would like me to return. Did I get to that part originally? Ooh, is that a gem or was that a monster? Yep. It's a gem. Which would give me back my home. I'd have to take a massive pay cut. Aww. Cinema can wait. Gotta be better for cinema. Have to take a massive pay cut. I'll get a stable internet back. But it depends how many hours they offer me. You see the nub. Ooh, got an amazing review. Ooh. Is that another extra drill? No, it's an electric jump. Oh, there's so many jumps. What was showing, Mish Mishty Mish? Do I even remember which way I went up this place? The answer is probably no. And also tomorrow I'm going to spend some time fixing the Yeti. Probably going to involve another couple of programs being installed, but then it means hopefully it should sound nice and not like I've got it jammed into a cave. So I'm more than aware that I sound like I'm down well at the best of times, but this microphone has been especially cruel to my voice. I missed the other items, but I got this one. Oh, it's a nugget. Okay. That sounds awfully familiar, but it's not. I think it might have been at least. Just found a poop nugget. Yeah. I touched the poop nugget. I haven't actually sold anything in this entire game yet. Should probably do that. No, Kefka has asked me if I'm doing, if I'm doing post-game. I don't think I'm going to be doing so. But my problem with post-game stuff is always that I just find it disinteresting. I could pour an amount of time into another game than just playing extra content. If that makes any sense. And I've already Road Freddy, can you stop telling me that the road has been published? Like, I know. I've been reading it. Let's get the other item. I'm going to be climbing this mountain quite a bit. Like, I used to do post-game quite a lot, but then I realised I've got too many games to be concentrating on that. If it was an expansion pack, I might be a bit more lenient, but it's not. We have found Mole. It's because you got the ship, and it's because you've got the chills. Even when you have a fever, it's because the outside world feels colder. I've had that. I've had fever and chills at the same time. Which is fun, because it then means I don't know what temperature it is at all. Right, so let's see if I can catch this guy. Nope. It's going to be one of these, is it? Excellent. I've got that. Okay, I think Rotor Ready has broken. Because that is now the 5th time it's told me that the rotor is published for like 3 weeks in advance. Hmm. So let's pick up that last item. Wild Charge. That's 6. I now have a broken company app. Of course I do. Yeah, Road to Ready is... Yeah, Road to Ready is completely screwed. I haven't even got it up. It just keeps telling me over and over, you've got new shifts. Alright, let's dismiss them and see if it'll just dump another load in there. Of course, tomorrow we can Thunderbolt. I haven't even got Thunderbolt. There we go, there's another one. Road to Ready is. Don't even have Road to Ready up. Yes I do, go away. We are here, finally. We're at the Pokemon League. What have you got? You've got balls. Don't really want balls. You have balls as well. I see your maneuver. So let's see if we can solve this the American way. Let's see how much I can sell. I have 5 nuggets. And there's a pearl. Stardust. Star piece. There's probably someone dedicated to mushrooms somewhere in the world, just like Earthbound. Dusk and Dawn. Dawn I do... Hello, Captain Bravo. Am I just... Am I just like Lurk City tonight? How's it going? Big Pearl. Really do some more interactive stuff. I just haven't figured out what, especially while I'm on travelling still. And fun luck, I suppose.
Mankind discovers pants.
Oh, very funny, Bob.
Finding even more pants. I'm not going to repeat the line I had earlier. Deactivate that then. Save. What are we thinking? Can this team brave the first round of Elite Four? Also, Road to Ready is still broken. It's even though I've dismissed it, it is still telling me I've got shifts. It is completely screwed. But thankfully I have no money to lose. All I can gain is experience. ghost types. Who would be best to lead ghost types? Probably Crocodile. I guess. I guess Stoutland is a good choice, but then Stoutland doesn't have... Actually, no, he has 2 moves, which I can actually do, I think. Chauntal. Chauntal? Don't worry, my name's also unpronounceable to you lot anyway. I've heard this music before. Right, I have Crunch and I have Surf. Stoutland is quickly getting bodied. That hurts. Well, that was a spirited start. Didn't do enough damage. Oh, having my low attack is not good. Well, I'm already getting slaughtered. Jellicent is Ghost Water. Is Queen Jellicent as well. Well, it was worth an attempt. Golurk. Here comes the big action figure. I think they are out of... yeah, only 2 full restores. Just like normal. Chandelure. I should probably have kept Samurott for this one. What have I got left? I have... not great and not great. Yep, I thought as much. Crocodile. There's Fire Blast. Well, I lost all of my Pokemon in the first gym leader. So it's an Elite Four member. This bodes well. I'm glad I have 48 revives. Like, I've not had this, but like, I think the last Elite Four I faced was Moon, and Moon... To me, Moon wasn't too difficult. I think I ran out of resources near the end. Like, literally, I think I had... I think it was just the reference to Apollo, the crab, was the only problem I had. This one, I've literally got to the first one and had my teeth knocked in. I mean, I'll take half money every single time. It won't really matter. It's all the experience, and the problem is it suffers the same problem as the first area, where Pokemon don't give you enough experience in random encounters to actually make it viable to go and grind there. So I think this one, while it's seen as one of the best, and also has a ROM hack which makes it harder, I'm going to state it that it is not balanced in the right way, and that's just from my personal perspective. Mostly because I do things in a stupid order. Like, the game I have on to replace this afterwards is going to be even more interesting. To see how my style of playing RPGs works against it. I mean, I used to do something called the Colours of Mental Health. You play stuff here? Nah, I never do. You want to learn Swagger. You got the moves like Jagger. Oh no, Swagger is one I don't like. You had Sork and Throw. I'm glad Air Slash is getting as many flinches as it is. Now, this Pokemon is at the appropriate level. This is last Pokemon. And I think it's probably faster than me. Oh, of course you're a dark type. Shit. That was a dumb idea. Thought Crocodile was actually immune, but no, sadly not. Now I can get ahead with Samurott, but it's not very clever. Samurott can't take that much damage before it goes down. Also, this thing is... Well, that was the right maneuver. Grand Zeb Striker wants to learn Wild Charge. Yeah, I'll keep with what I have. It's just takedown, but worse. Because it has a typing. I mean, I'm either going to succeed on this the first time and be very confused, or I'm going to fail and I'm going to have to do it all again. But my Pokemon will steadily gain levels to the point where it won't matter any longer. What is it called? Having the cup half full. Which gym leader type is this? This looks like a psychic type. The weirdest stuff we can find. Believe me, soon we'll be getting weirder. Actually, we'll put stamina on that ahead. Right, Cardin CL is going on a break tomorrow. I am not playing it because I need to catch up with other things. It is psychic. Weirder than that one game? Which one game? I mean, I've done, what, Dark Arkham? Dark Arkham was weird. Oh, that's Jazzpunk. Jazzpunk was funny. Like, I've got more weird shit. I've got incredibly weird shit. You have Ice Beam. You bastard. I think Jazzpunk... I'm trying to remember who made Jazzpunk. But it's definitely one that was weird at the time and still is, but it's played for laughs rather than not straight-faced. But here she comes. Fashion model of the century. Eaten by crocodile. Sandstorm. Want to learn Darude, do you? Oh, yeah. Well, chip damage is not one of my favourites. What is something else that I have that's weird? Like, the problem is when I indulge myself, a lot of people don't like that. It's... Ah, we have fire as my final one. Because it's like, it's not... I've always been a sort of a non-conformist streamer. I always play what I want and also what I weirdly find fascinating. Like, I still have Marco the Brave to do at some point, which is not what's coming on tomorrow. Tomorrow is chill game time. Because, as I will state, Monday the 2nd, I will not be streaming, even though I have the day off. I am being a support for another streamer. And this was worked out a few weeks ago. And then we'll be back to Earthbound and, if I finish Pokemon today, the next game on the line. Wait a second. Plus I need to get a game from the Steam sale. So we're going to heal him, so let's use Air Cutter. He now no longer has any means of healing. Let's just take him and smash him into the ground. Crown Dark. Do I send Gerda or Samurott? Let's send Samurott out because he needs experience. I'll go down what I have installed on Steam at the moment, just to let people know. I have Card and CL, Castlevania Anniversary Collection, Cubicle Quest, Dice Folk, Digimon, Far Sky, I have Final Fantasy IV 3D Remake reinstalled, I have Home, I have Just Get Through, I have Knights of Pen and Paper, I have Marco Beyond Brave, Might and Magic Clash of Heroes, QB, Thing I'm Playing Tomorrow, and East 2. I have a lot of weird stuff installed at the moment. And these should be games, hopefully, that do not tax the mongoloid bones of this internet that I'm having to use, which I am trying to go and get a 4G connection, despite being in a partial dead zone. You're sending out your last Pokemon now. Let's headbutt it with a zebra. Alright. Dynamic Hammer Polwinch. Wait, how do you know Aerial Ace? You can't fly. Knock the kitty down! How do you know Aerial Ace? You can't fly! I'm starting to sound incredulous at the fact that Pokemon is doing some weird stuff with this one. That's because it is. Somehow managed to survive this long with a team that I basically picked up at the start of the game. With the exception of one Pokemon there, and that's Crocodile. Castle of Team Plasma. You know when Pokemon used to have an air of believability? And they decided, you know what? You know who had a good plan? Paper Bowser. Let's just copy what he did and steal an entire place and take it into the sky. You're actually doing that, aren't you? Oh no, you're not. Okay. That's fine. Let him know that. Can I heal my Pokemon? Or is that just no? Do I have to go find a doctor in the middle of nowhere? Ah, 6 old Ben in a row. This isn't ominous at all. Here comes 6 gym leaders. And Iris for some reason. Pokemon trainer, please proceed. You just see him just going behind all of them, going la la la. Don't know which way I'm going. Your castle is confusing. Oh, you again? Oh, okay. The screen is lagging? No, I am dropping frames. Connection's not good. Connection is not good. Yeah, my stream is not correct. Why is it? How have you achieved this? How have you achieved this? There we go. That's how. I forgot I had a DOSBox capture somewhere. Oh well, doesn't matter. Didn't miss much. Just saw me get lost. I think I opened that up during the fight with Thingy, previous leader. This is the most important part? Yeah. I actually bothered to go back and listen to one of my old streams recently. I went and looked at, which one was it? I think I was watching the trading card game one that I did many years ago. At this point, I think that was like one of the... like year 1 or year 2? It might have been year 1 actually. And it sounds so much different because I didn't know how to balance my audio properly. So the game sounds quiet and I sound quiet, and that's pretty much how it goes. Oh, did I just make a mess? I did. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, good. Right, I am going to quickly use the restroom. I will be right back. was an unfortunate set of circumstances, but I needed to do it. I had quite a lot to drink. I need more revives. So I think I've had, during this stream, 1 cup of water, 1 was 1 pint of Vimto and an entire advanced GG hydration tangerine flavour. Just to prove how much of a uncomfortable tech wizard I can be occasionally. With that, I am running this at 1,000 kilobytes a second. I think someone's actually back. Yeah. The Wi-Fi is fluctuating quite wildly at the moment. Don't think the booster would help either. Oh, N's room. Thanks for the candy. Wait, why was this necessary? Go into our Lord and Master's bedroom. Any particular reason? No. We built him a room just to keep him isolated. That's why he doesn't take defeat well. He hasn't learned it. You stood in my way, old man, and then wandered off. Well, that's just annoying more than anything else. Show me the strength of your determination. Wow, you got your head handed to you. Do you want to get back and try again? I was gonna say, this is probably one of the most boring set of legendary Pokemon. They're dragon types with an extra step, so it's just Diamond and Pearl again. Dragon types with an extra step. Do you like Dragon Fire or Dragon Thunder? Like you having Godzilla versus Ghidorah. Stuff's happening. Catch Reshiram, make it your ally. What if I don't want to? What if I just want to sit here for eternity and do nothing? Turbo Blaze. Well, you know, because this file is not going much further than an... Let's whack it in the face with a Master Ball. I'm trying to figure out a game in which I haven't used the Master Ball on one of those, and I'm trying to think which one it would be. Stoutland, it's time for you to wave goodbye. Revoke on a hurt. No, they're perfectly fine. Then. Oh, he has 6. Oh, and Zakrum's going first. Which means I am automatically in trouble. No, no, not. Reshiram's going first. Terravolt. Turbo Blaze. You forget your place. If you do not have dragon type moves, you're dumb. You can do damage, but you will never be effective. Haha. Fuck am I talking about? What the hell is that? It is a Toidle. Probably a bad idea because this is a water ground type, I want to say. Crocodile versus Turtle. Turtle wins. No, good. You better be heavy. You are heavy. Prepare to leap. Kick. Well, you know, you can kind of be a bitch. But I need to start bringing my Pokemon back to life soon. It knows Hyper Beam. And then it's probably got... Nope, he doesn't. Good. He's out of all restores. Do I even have a I do have a fire type, he's just dead. Right, Samurott go. I'm going to pick my Pokemon back up. It started hailing. Revenge! Taste it, ice cream cone. This is dark. This is dark type. There's 2 Pokemon left. If I can get him to waste a turn, and then use Revenge, I should be able to kill it in one hit. There. As long as it doesn't score a critical hit, I should be fine. Revenge! The hell is this? Oh, you're that thing. Ow. Turbo Blaze. Wow, that's bullshit. Right, let's start picking my Pokemon back up. Stone Edge is incredibly powerful for all the wrong reasons. And to last more than a turn. I can't last more than a turn. Yeah, I'm gonna call this a wipe. A lot of it was just Pokemon I didn't know. Let's have a look. This is the only Pokemon I don't know, so... Rock Flying. Okay, so I just need to... okay, I might have a plan here. I've got no rota ready, for God's sake. I know. She's... You literally went a period of 10 minutes without telling me that you need to tell me that I have a new rota published. I mean, my team is reasonably fine. It's just Samurai who's underleveled, like, massively. The rest of the stream is going to be me headbutting the wall that is N. I will break him. He will go down. Zekrom seems like the problem, but it's not. Oh, what the hell are you again? Caracosta. I really don't remember. It's the only Pokemon I don't remember of this entire team. Oh, it's the Toidle. It's the turtle that absolutely decimated me. Oh, I remember who I'm going to use. I'm going to use Gerda. Because it's heavy. It's a rock type. Even with a partial effectivity, I will be able to knock it down. It was this Pokemon. This Pokemon was the one that cost me so much time. Ah, you didn't need to use Aqua Jet, but you tried anyway. Oh, you have Thunderbolt. Oh, that's the wrong move. Fusion Flare. Right, he's sending this one out early. Please don't do it. Okay, that's lucky. You need to do a little less damage. I don't trust that, not in the slightest. Gonna use Stone Edge, and I don't think Reshiram's that fast. What moves do you have? Please stop. Well, never mind. Alright then, Zed Striker. You better be good on this one. Good. Okay, just needed a quick tinker, that was it. Oh bugger, I just realised... Oh no, I got it. I know what I did last time. I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. Come on, hit me. Aquatail. What is this? 1 power, 90 accuracy. As much as Aquajet is fine, it's kind of not great for this part now. Now I need to heal somewhat back up, so I can use Revenge and take this last one down. But also, Revenge needs to require him to miss. It was very wildly between 84 and something else. So that's what, 73? 73 and 84? Can't really trust it yet. Just need Focus Blast and miss. That's even worse. That's also bad. Okay, now I can hit you. Or not. Where the world will be decided by teeth and a mane of hair. What's the point of letting go of Pokemon? I don't know, because you love them. It's one of those, it just doesn't make much sense. Oh, that's gross. You didn't even heal me from that battle. Oh no, you did. Okay, never mind. It's not extrasensory. Works against this. Well, let's use Fusion Flare. The more I make you waste your items, the happier I will be. Bouffalant. Okay, we have a normal type finally. And probably a very heavy one at that. With that enormous mane of hair. I don't know what you lot do as Taurus types. You just kind of keep hurting yourself, so do that for me. No, let's not use that. Let's actually just use stuff that I don't need. It's full of moves which just hurt it so much. Defeated by stalling. And then we have the three-headed dragon. I don't think Reshiram's going to survive, that's the only problem. Impulse and kills him, yeah. Ah, so frustrating. Imagine this is his most powerful Pokemon too. And is annoying to deal with. Did survive, just. Hopefully you should not know acrobatics this time. Oh, but you know Exeter, Bug hurts. Bug hurts a lot. I think I'm fast enough to get rid of him. course he has one of those. I have no grass types. It happened to use Pokemon as bait, but unfortunately that's kind of what I had to do there. Well, that's my last Hyper Potion. It carried me far. And then I finally got hit with the Muddy Water and it was a critical. Now, hopefully with Rain Dance it should mean I can now use Revenge properly. That is way too little. What that earthquake did to me. Seems like I'm juggling two different Pokemon here. Just to remove this one. Oh, fuck off. I'm even gonna be able to deal with this thing? Problem is I need time and I'm not getting it. Too many of my Pokemon are weak to it, and it is incredibly fast. Okay, this is last Pokemon. I still have 4. Okay, cost a bit more to deal with it than I wanted, but still. That is it, I think. Fuck all money as well, cheap old man. This man, however, needs to be thrown in jail. Let me get a close-up of your face. Zekrom, just go fly off into the world. And that's it. That is the first part of that. And that's about as far as I'm going. Like, this is just mostly to get it cleared off of my list, not actually going more beyond that. It's much more difficult than the actual games, than the last set of games I've played, which is fine. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. I literally have nothing to say. It is Pokemon. What do you want me to do? It hasn't changed. It's the most difficult Pokemon game I've played. But that's it. There's literally nothing above that. There's nothing more. Oh, dear me. I literally don't have anything more to say about Pokemon. But that means that apart from New Pokemon Snap, that is every single Pokemon game off of my list. I've played every single mainline generation from 1 to 7, and so far, if I'm ever going to play another mainline one and open the Pandora's box once again, it's going to be Generation 3. I just like Generation 3 more, I'm sorry. I'm not a Gen 1er, but I am a dumber. That's another RPG cleared this year, which means that next week there will be a new one on the table. Pokemon is now being shunted off. Aha, bot. Thank you, Seribot. Chat, praise Seribot. It's doing a good job. It means that I don't have to keep banning bots myself. Just save the game for the final time. Then it is done. Pokemon is over. Okay, let's see who's online. That means that next week... Where the hell did I pin that? Let me look. Schedule. Did I post it 4 days ago? I think I did. The picture. So the 5th of December will not be Pokemon. It will be something else. I just need to update everything. I am going to go look for someone to raid and then get the hell out of Dodge. Thank you everyone for watching Pokemon Black. Never again. Never again. I think most people who are playing Pokemon Black are... Yeah, not really on raid. Where is he? I'm going to go raid TM Lemen, who is currently playing a first playthrough game redeem of Secret of Mana. So we're going to head over there, and I will see you all later tomorrow for some game which you will have no idea what the fuck it is. So have a good evening, take care, good night.